Hello guys and girls, how's it going? Screezilla here, and you join me in an English Electric Lightning. A fantastic plane. And a supersonic plane. And a plane we may see in the future, because Rank 6 aircraft are arriving. Yes, we're going to be seeing Rank 6 appearing. Now, everybody and their son has done a video on this now, and everybody's talked about it, and I can't really add much more. We're going to be getting the MiG-19, the F-100D Super Sabre, and the Javelin Mark 9. All very capable, very fast aircraft. But what else will we get? Well, there are a fair few aircraft that could well be added. However, the thing I'm more interested in is the weapons that these aircrafts will be getting. Because one thing that we know is we're getting the AIM-9 Sidewinder, a heat-seeking missile. Basically, infrared-guided missile, uses heat-seeker technology. And these kind of missiles are very early-stage missiles. Hahowever, there are many missiles that we could be seeing as well. And one of the main ones I wanted to talk about, well, there were two. There's the de Havilland Firestreak. Now, we'll start with that being that we're with a British plane and we're in a Lightning. The Lightning did carry the de Havilland Firestreak. Now, the Firestreak was a very, very good missile. It was much heavier than the AIM-9, but it was very, very, very deadly. One of the things with the Firestreak was it was capable of around about Mach 3, which the Sidewinder was around about 2.5, so it was a much faster missile. However, it did suffer a lot in things like cloud banks and stuff like that. Now, it wasn't just the planes that we're looking at that carried them. There were other planes that did carry these, and predominantly it was tested on things like the de Havilland de Havilland Venom, and also the Sea Vixen. And with that, it brings up the question of, will we be seeing these planes getting air-to-air missiles? And that's going to be a really interesting aspect. Now, the big one I wanted to talk about, and the main one I wanted to talk about today, was actually the Sparrow. Now, the AIM-7 Sparrow. Now, this is a slightly different missile. This was one that used semi-radar active. It had the same infrared. It was still a very early missile. It still had its issues. It was a bit heavier. It was a bit more clumsy than the AIM-9. And generally, it was used for fighting bombers. Now, this was carried on the Sky Knight, the F-3D. Now, the F-3D is a 7.0 aircraft. However, if it gets access to air-to-air missiles, even though they're not the greatest, they're still going to be very effective against things like the IL-28s, who don't have great manoeuvrability. Basically, that's what they were there for, is just to counteract things like those planes. To counteract these sort of subsonic, very fast bombers, very heavy planes, you know, even the things like the Bears and stuff like that. But they weren't great at fighting fighter planes. The Sparrow was also used as a basis for surface-to-air missiles. There was also the Sea Sparrow, which was used on ships. So it was a very versatile missile. But being the fact it was capable to go onto some of those earlier planes and some of those earlier jets and some of the jets that we have in-game currently, it does ask that question of, will we be seeing them on jets that carried air-to-air missiles? Will we be seeing some really interesting variants of air-to-air missiles on some of the lower BR planes, and is that going to affect their positioning on the tech tree? Because you have to say that if the Sky Knight does get the Fox 1, it's going to be a deadly plane because it's going to be able to launch them. Now, the thing about the AIM-7 was it was a fire and forget weapon. Much like the de Havilland Fire Streak. It had a much longer range to it. Now, the Fire Streak is actually a mid-range missile, as well as the AIM-7 Sparrow. And the thing about these weapons is they could be used at very long distances. They were basically what you would call a fire and forget. You'd still need to get a lock-on of a target, but you'd sort of... you didn't need to be so close to the enemy. Now, another thing that some of these missiles had was proximity fuses. So they weren't there to hit a target, they were there to actually go beside it and then explode, and it would cause massive damage to aircraft. So the real question is will we be seeing them? Now, the Fire Streak should be on the Javelin. The Gloucester Javelin was a fantastic aircraft, and it was actually the plane that came before this, the plane that came before the Lightning. And it was a very capable vehicle. Although, just to give you an idea of the speed differences of these planes, the Lightning was almost double the speed of the Javelin. Now, when we get to things like Lightnings and things like the F4s and stuff like that, you've got extremely fast planes. We're getting into the really fast territory of planes, and they're very hard to sort of chase down. But the thing about these planes is they're not very manoeuvrable. They're not the greatest at turning, they have trouble, they do struggle a bit. But they are fast, and that's where they really use their advantage from. Now, they were used in the role of interceptors in the nuclear era, and that means that they had to get up very quickly, had to get up to speed very fast, and get to ridiculous altitudes very fast. This is going to be a really interesting time for us. But as I said, the most interesting thing for me is what we're going to get as weaponry. Whereas the AIM-9 Sidewinder requires you to be relatively close to the target. I can't remember the exact details of the effective range of it. I think it was around about 9 kilometers, something like that. It was. So I'm just having a quick glance at my thing. Not finding what I'm looking for. The early variants, required you to be quite close to the targets, sort of within that sort of 5 to 10 kilometer range, whereas things like the Fire Streak and the AIM-7 had a much longer distance, and you could just go off a really decent distance. And in that case, you'd be looking at the aircraft, firing the missile, and then moving on to the next target. And you could sort of fire, with some of them, you could actually fire multiple missiles. I think it was the Fire Streak that actually had the ability to have multi-targeting abilities. So it allowed the interceptor to lock onto one target, then to get onto the next target and sort of cause a lot of damage. It's going to be a very, very interesting thing to get in-game. The other thing, of course, is we're going to be getting more and more air-to-surface missiles. And again, there are many, many, many missiles in that variant. Even things like guided bombs, we might be seeing more of those coming in. We did get, of course, the guided bomb with the Fritz X. So it's going to be interesting to see where this technology leads us. And the thing I'm worried about for this update is just the current 10.0, sorry, not 10.0, the current, 9.0s, the current top tier planes. Basically, the IL-28 is not a slow plane. However, we're 15 kilometers out now. Now, the Lightning is a much faster plane. However, the Gloucester Javelin is no slouch. The closing speeds are going to be ridiculous. If you're going to try and run away from these planes, you're not going to make it. It's going to require things like turn fighting and really dodging, and that's going to be very hard. However, one thing that you can do, and I hope they do implement it, is clouds. Because one thing these infrared missiles struggle with is clouds and also flying up to the sun. So just look at the closing speeds here. It's just insane. You know, it really is just insane. However, clouds may play an important role. So for instance, we get locked on. Say there's MiG-19 on our sail, and it locks on. What do? Well, first of all, what we can do is we can perform a really, really risky move, black out, and then try and recover our plane, going into cloud cover. And what happens with that is the infrared sort of loses its target, and then it just wobbles around and then loses its positioning, sometimes even self-destructing. If we're in cloud cover, for instance, sometimes it can't find us. One other interesting thing is things like the Withen. The Withen plane, for instance, with the turboprops. They're going to be quite useful because they produce a very low amount of heat emissions. And heat-seeking missiles really struggle with them. So you may find that planes like the Wyvern actually can defeat heat-seeking missiles. Now, I'm not saying they're going to do great, but they've got a chance to do that. Now, the other thing that people will be able to do is, say we get locked on again. We've got no cloud cover. We're going to pull up, and we're going to fly straight towards the sun. Now, what that does is, first of all, it blinds our enemy. They can't really see us because the sun is sort of in our way. But, of course, the sun is very hot. So we keep flying up. The heat seeker gets locked onto the sun. We perform some fun maneuvers. We stall out. Cut our engine off. Now, we're still going to have some heat in there, but we're going to lose a little bit. And that should be enough to just let the missile cruise past us and head towards the sun, thinking it's us. Now, of course, one of the problems with cutting an engine off on a jet is restarting. Sometimes they don't like to restart. Luckily, in War Thunder, we don't have that problem. So things like that may be viable options of getting out of trouble. It's going to be interesting to see how this goes. I am looking forward to this. Just having something new in game for planes is just so great. It's going to revitalise jet combat. I really hope it goes well, and I really hope Gaijin don't mess this up, because this could be such a fun system. It's also going to give helicopters a chance to fight back against planes, because helicopters can be deadly because they're such a simple platform. They can hover, find their target, and fire off their missiles. And there are some very effective missiles. Again, they can use things like sidewinders to much effect to take out the enemy aircraft, and there's not much you can sort of do about it sometimes in those sort of speed conditions. Getting used to firing your Aidens, of course, is going to be a little bit tricky as well, because it is very odd firing at this speed, because there's such closing speeds. You really have to get used to how they fire. Yeah, basically it's going to be an interesting system. It's going to be interesting to see. I do hope we see some other nations get some supersonic jets as well, not just the usual ones. Holy crap, that was very close. We just missed his wing via Nat's cock. Now, scoring off some speed here. But we can absolutely do that. Luckily their tail gunners are not firing at us. Nice big burst of our Aidens. Another thing that's going to be very tricky is, of course, air-to-air combat with guns. The Americans found this out to their peril, was gunnery with these jets is very tricky. Not impossible, but it is tricky. One other thing that we could see is a small implementation of radar-guided machine gunnery. I doubt we will, but it could be something for the future. That IL-28 is going to go down. So, yeah, we'll see how this goes. And really, I'm optimistic for the future at the moment. I am very optimistic. You know, hopefully things will turn out pretty good. We're going to get some interesting things. We're going to get some interesting planes coming in. We're going to find some really, really interesting vehicles and also interesting weapon platforms, because that's something we haven't really seen in War Thunder. You know, it's just different weapons platforms. You know, it's something that, as I said, it's going to be very interesting to see how it goes. And with that, we get a crash. The game has just crashed on me. So I think I'll end the video there because I'm running out of things to say. But yeah, supersonic jets are coming, and I could not be more happy. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate the support. Sorry this video's taken a little bit of time to come out. I've been a bit sick of late, as usual. Sickness, yay. But it will come soon. One other thing I wanted just to say at the end of this video is I'm going to put a link below and a little link in the end of the video for a charity. For supporting cats in South Australia. We've had a big influx of cats, kitten season, and this charity, Paws and Claws, is currently doing all they can to look after the cats, and it is a really, really important thing. If you can spare any money, please feel free to, or just share the links around. Just share them around Facebook, places like that. It would be really, really welcome. I recently had to go to a friend, and there were 2 kittens that were taken from a house with 40 cats in them. These 2 kittens had, just close this. These kittens had conjunctivitis, and it was just turning into ulceration of the eyes. Luckily, I managed to clean it out before it ulcerated. It was heartbreaking. These kittens weighed nothing. They were smaller than my housemate's rats. To give you an idea of how small these kittens were, they were about the same size as a rat. A small rat at that. They were both malnourished, but luckily they both made it through. With Paws and Claws, of course, they paid the surgery fees, the vet bills, everything like that. The money goes towards that. They're a non-killing adoption agency, so they keep all the cats. Now, unfortunately, I can't foster because my housemate is very allergic to cats. However, one of my best friends, she does foster, and it's heartbreaking, but it's fantastic at the same time. So, if you can spare a couple of dollars, please help out, or if you can share, it all helps out in the end. Thank you so much. Alright guys, until next time, this is me, Carl Screezilla, out. Bye bye.